The champagne glass made 3 small sounds against Margaret Hall's ring. Tink, tink, tink. Around our table, conversations stopped. Beyond us, the army ballroom still glowed in blue and gold, but the noise seemed to move farther away. The jazz band softened. Silverware paused over white plates. At the front of the room, the empty place setting for fallen soldiers stood under a single light. It was my 31st birthday. My mother-in-law smiled at me as if she had been waiting for this moment all year. "Julia," she said, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear, "we wanted to give you something meaningful. After all, your whole life is about service." My husband, David, lifted his phone and pointed the camera directly at my face. His sister Emma covered her mouth, already laughing. Margaret slid a glittering pink envelope across the tablecloth. "So tonight," she continued, "we decided to serve you." Inside were divorce papers. David had already signed them. Margaret leaned closer, perfume and champagne on her breath. "My son deserves a real wife. Someone who can elevate this family. Not someone who spends her life playing in the dirt." They expected tears. Maybe shouting. Maybe a scene they could replay later over drinks in Dallas. What they did not know was that I had already seen the envelope. They did not know I had read the email chain between David and the family lawyer. And they had no idea what was folded inside the black clutch resting on my lap. "I am Sergeant Julia Hall, United States Army Logistics." For most of my marriage, David's family treated that title like an embarrassment. That night, they mistook my silence for weakness. It was the most expensive mistake they ever made. 2 years earlier, I had believed marrying David meant joining a family. I came from a small, ordinary home, where people talked too loudly at dinner and wrapped Christmas presents with whatever paper was left in the closet. David came from Highland Park, old Dallas money, private clubs, family trusts, and portraits of dead relatives watching from paneled walls. The first week after our honeymoon, Margaret hosted a cocktail party. I wore a navy dress I had saved for months to buy. She introduced me to 2 women beside the fireplace. "This is David's wife, Julia," she said. They smiled. Then Margaret added, "She's a sergeant." Her tone changed the word. It no longer sounded like rank. It sounded like a warning label. One woman gave David a sympathetic look. The other asked whether I planned to do something more settled after the army. Before I could answer, Margaret pulled Emma toward them and announced that her daughter was engaged to a cardiologist. "A real professional," she said. David squeezed my hand under the conversation. At the time, I thought the gesture meant he understood. Later, I realized it meant he wanted me to stay quiet. That became our pattern. At Thanksgiving, Margaret asked everyone to say what they were grateful for. When my turn came, I said I was grateful for my soldiers and for the chance to serve. She laughed softly. "Well, every society needs people for all kinds of work." Everyone heard what she meant. I looked at David. He studied his pumpkin pie. At Christmas, she gave him a vintage watch and Emma a trip to Paris. My gift was a book about leaving the military for manual labor. Inside it, she had folded a set of hospital scrubs. "Perhaps Emma's husband can help you find work in housekeeping," she said. The room smelled of pine, coffee, and the expensive candle burning on the mantel. I remember those details because humiliation has a strange way of preserving ordinary things. David said nothing. For a long time, I told myself his silence was discomfort. Then I called it weakness. Eventually, I understood it was agreement. 6 months before the army ball, I came home early and found him ending a phone call. A message from Margaret lit up his screen. "She can't find out. Handle it." I asked him what it meant. He sat at the kitchen counter, rubbing both hands over his face. Then he admitted that his inheritance depended on maintaining the right family image. Margaret believed an enlisted wife hurt that image. "She thinks people judge us," he said. "And what do you think?" He stared at the cold coffee between us. "That this is complicated." It was not complicated. I simply was not ready to accept the answer. A month later, I heard him speaking to Margaret through the half-open study door. "You have to choose," she told him, "her or this family's future." There was a long pause. I stood barefoot in the hallway, holding my running shoes, waiting for my husband to defend me once. Instead, he sighed. "I know, Mom. I'll handle it." That sentence ended the marriage, though the paperwork came later. I did not confront him. I did what soldiers do when the ground shifts under them. I assessed. I made a plan. My first plan was officer candidate school. I thought if Sergeant Hall embarrassed them, perhaps Officer Hall would force them to respect me. It was the wrong reason, but it gave me movement when I felt trapped. I enrolled in online college classes. My alarm rang at 4:30 every morning. I ran physical training before sunrise, worked 10-hour days managing equipment and supply movements, then came home and wrote papers at a small desk under a yellow lamp. David complained about the typing. He complained about the light. He complained that I was no fun anymore. I finished the semester with a 4.0. Then I needed his financial information and signature to continue. I placed the forms on the kitchen table one Saturday morning. The coffee was still warm when he swept the pages onto the floor. "More debt for this fantasy?" he said. "It's not a fantasy. Julia, look at yourself. You are not officer material." He did not shout. That made it worse. He spoke with the bored certainty of someone correcting a child. "My mother is right. You need a realistic plan." The papers lay across the linoleum. One page had landed beneath his chair. I picked them up after he left. Then I stopped the classes. That was the lowest point. Not because a degree was impossible, but because I had allowed people who despised me to become the judges of what I deserved. I started applying for civilian logistics jobs in secret. Every application disappeared into automated rejection emails. No interviews, no calls. Later, during the divorce, we discovered Margaret had contacted people in her network and described me as unstable, difficult, and unqualified. At the time, all I knew was that every door seemed locked. One night, I parked outside my unit headquarters and cried with my forehead against the steering wheel. A yellow security light flickered above the Jeep. Rain tapped against the windshield. I felt ashamed because I led soldiers for a living, yet I could not lead myself out of my own house. Someone knocked on the window. First Sergeant Michael Carter stood outside holding 2 paper cups. He was in his 50s, quiet, precise, and impossible to fool. I rolled down the window and tried to apologize. He handed me the coffee. "Nothing to apologize for, Hall." He did not ask for details. He looked across the empty lot and let me recover without being watched. Then he said, "Whatever is happening outside that gate, it does not change what is true inside it. You are one of the strongest NCOs in this company. Your soldiers trust you. You solve problems other people avoid. That is fact, not encouragement." I started crying again, not because his words hurt, because they were the first honest kindness I had received in months. He nodded toward the gate. "Don't let people out there take what you earned in here." Before he left, he told me he had corrected an award packet I had missed during the worst weeks at home. He had seen I was struggling and protected my record without humiliating me. That cup of terrible coffee changed something. It did not rescue me. It reminded me I was still capable of rescuing myself. A week before the Army Ball, I opened LinkedIn at the same desk where I had abandoned college. There was a message from Sarah Chen, a senior recruiter at Aegis Defense Solutions, one of the largest defense contractors in the country. She wrote that my background in military logistics, team leadership, and high-pressure operations was exactly what they needed for a new integration project in Austin. Then came the sentence I read 6 times. "Your military experience is not something to transition away from. It is an invaluable asset." Invaluable. Margaret used that word for diamonds and family property. A stranger used it for me. The interview happened the next afternoon. The department director was a retired Navy captain. He did not ask why I lacked a corporate title. He asked how I handled failure. I told him about a field exercise when a convoy carrying critical parts was rerouted after midnight. Radios were unreliable. 3 units were blaming each other. I built a new movement plan, reassigned drivers, confirmed every handoff, and had the equipment in place before sunrise. He listened without interrupting. "That is the job," he said. "Different clothes, same pressure." The offer arrived the next morning. Project Manager, Logistics and Integration. Austin, Texas. $85,000 a year. Full benefits, relocation assistance. Nearly twice what I earned in uniform. More than David made. Enough to leave without asking anyone's permission. I printed the offer and hid it inside the black clutch I planned to carry at the ball. Then fear returned. For 2 days I could not accept it. Margaret's voice had moved into my head. David's too. They told me Aegis had made a mistake, that I would fail, that I would lose the army and the marriage and end up with nothing. People sometimes think emotional abuse only hurts while the other person is speaking. The deeper damage begins when they no longer have to speak, because you have learned to repeat their cruelty for them. I almost rejected the offer. That Saturday, First Sergeant Carter found me sitting in the Jeep again. I asked him how someone knows whether to keep fighting, or accept they are not good enough. He studied me for a moment. Then he asked whether I knew the Serenity Prayer. Accept what you cannot change, he said. Change what you can. Know the difference. He pointed toward the road beyond the gate. You cannot change people committed to misunderstanding you. Stop throwing yourself against that door. Then he tapped the roof of my Jeep. But if another door is open and you are afraid to walk through it, that is not fate, that is fear wearing their voice. I accepted the Aegis offer before I drove home. After that, the days before the ball felt different. Margaret still performed her sweetness. David still pretended affection, but I no longer searched their faces for proof that I mattered. 3 nights before the event, I came home and found Margaret at our table, with the glittering pink envelope and a stack of legal papers. She shoved them inside when she saw me. Your special birthday gift, she said. It will change everything. I smiled. I believe you. Her expression tightened. Calm was not part of the reaction she had rehearsed. 2 nights later, David left his email open on our computer. At the top was a thread with the family lawyer. I read his reply. The terms look good. Proceed with service at the event as planned. That message removed the last excuse I had made for him. He was not trapped between his wife and his mother. He had chosen a side and helped design the ambush. On the night of the ball, I polished every button on my Army service uniform. I aligned each ribbon and checked my rank insignia twice. Margaret saw the uniform as proof I belonged beneath her. I wore it because it was proof I had survived without her approval. At the ballroom, First Sergeant Carter and his wife sat beside us. Margaret wore dark silk. Emma kept checking her phone. David's hand was damp when he touched my back. Then came the champagne glass, the pink envelope, the camera, the words "Petition for Dissolution of Marriage." I flipped to the signature page. Margaret watched me with bright, hungry eyes. Emma was smiling. David kept filming. I took a black government pen from my clutch, clicked it once, signed my name. Then I slid the papers back across the table. Thank you, Margaret, I said. This may be the most useful gift you have ever given me. Her smile disappeared. David lowered the phone. That's it? No. I reached into the clutch and unfolded the Aegis offer. This is my birthday gift to myself. Margaret frowned at the letter. David recognized the logo first. I told them the title, the salary, and the relocation package. I did not brag. I simply stated facts. Then I looked at Margaret. You called my service worthless. Aegis called it invaluable. Emma's phone slipped from her hand and struck the plate. David's face emptied of color. Margaret opened her mouth, but for once, no polished sentence arrived. First Sergeant Carter stood and raised his glass. To Sergeant Hall, he said, his command voice carrying beyond our table. For her birthday, her new position, and the future she earned. Soldiers around us stood. Their spouses joined them. Glasses rose across 2 tables. The battalion commander walked over from the front of the ballroom. He shook my hand and said, Aegis is fortunate. You are one of our finest NCOs. He did not know the whole story. He did not need to. His respect made the contrast impossible to hide. The family who had spent 2 years calling me insignificant sat silent while the room recognized what they had refused to see. I did not give a speech. I picked up my clutch, thanked First Sergeant Carter with a nod, and walked out. Outside, the Texas air was cool and damp. Music faded behind the glass doors. I stood under the parking lot lights and took the first full breath I could remember taking in years. I was not happy yet. I was free. The second reveal came during the divorce. My attorney, Rebecca Evans, specialized in military family law. When I described the Army ball, she stopped writing. He filmed it? Yes. And his sister? Yes. Rebecca leaned back. They created evidence of planned public cruelty. Through discovery, David was required to produce the video, the messages, and the email chain with the family lawyer. The footage showed Margaret smiling while she insulted my career. It showed Emma laughing. It showed David keeping the camera on me while I opened the papers. The emails showed the event had been chosen deliberately because my chain of command would be present. They thought they were documenting my collapse. They documented their own intent. The court did not award me a fantasy fortune. It gave me something more realistic and more valuable: protection. I kept my Jeep, my savings, my retirement accounts, and every benefit I had earned. David's attempt to portray me as unstable failed because his own video showed exactly the opposite. I remained controlled. He and his family did not. Margaret's influence created another problem. Aegis security investigators discovered that she had contacted people connected to my applications and described me as unreliable. That conduct was documented and referred through legal channels. The family's reputation among the people they cared about began to fracture, not because I attacked them, but because their own messages exposed them. David's texts changed with each new consequence. First came anger. "You are humiliating this family." Then blame. "My mother was trying to protect me." Then fear. "Please tell your lawyer to stop." Finally, affection. "I made a mistake. We can fix this." I did not answer. The last time I saw him, rain was falling in the barracks parking lot. I had completed my out-processing and was carrying a folder of final documents to my Jeep. David pulled across the lane and got out without an umbrella. "Julia, wait." His shirt darkened in the rain. He looked exhausted and younger than I remembered. "We can go to counseling," he said. "I love you." For a moment I grieved. Not for our marriage as it was, but for the marriage I had kept hoping it might become. Then the grief passed. "No," I said. "You loved the version of me that stayed quiet enough to keep your life comfortable." He stepped closer. "What am I supposed to do now?" I looked at him and finally understood that he was still asking me to manage the consequences of his choices. "Your life belongs to your mother," I said. "Mine belongs to me." I got into the Jeep and drove away. At the first gas station beyond the gate, I blocked his number. 18 months later, my office is on the 22nd floor of a building in Austin. Frosted glass carries my name and the words Senior Project Manager. My salary is now 6 figures. I bought a small condo near Zilker Park. The first night there, I sat on the floor eating takeout because my furniture had not arrived. The room echoed. For a few minutes, the quiet frightened me. Then I realized no one was angry in the next room. No one was waiting to correct me. No one was measuring my value against a family name. It was only quiet. And quiet, without fear, is peace. At Aegis, the qualities Margaret mocked became the reason I advanced. My discipline was called focus. My experience leading soldiers was called operational leadership. My ability to stay calm when plans failed was called executive presence. One afternoon I received an email from Fort Cavazos. The Transition Assistance Program wanted me to speak to soldiers preparing to leave the service. A week later, I stood at a podium facing hundreds of uniforms. Many of those soldiers wore the same guarded expression I had once worn. The fear that the civilian world would not understand what they could do. I told them I had been afraid too. I told them there would be people who reduced years of leadership to a job title, people who saw sergeant and imagined only orders, dust, and manual work. "They are wrong," I said. "You already know how to lead when tired, decide with incomplete information, and keep moving when the plan collapses. Do not erase those skills to make someone else comfortable." In the front row sat Michael Carter, now retired. He wore a plain polo shirt, no rank, no ribbons. He was smiling. I looked at him before I finished. "You cannot change the minds of people determined to misunderstand you," I told the room. "But you can stop handing them authority over your future." The applause began slowly, then rose as soldiers stood. I did not think about Margaret in that moment. I did not think about David, or the pink envelope, or the video. Their part in my life had finally become small. That is what healing looked like for me. Not winning every argument. Not watching enemies suffer. Not becoming so successful that the past disappeared. It was reaching a day when their voices no longer narrated my life. For years, I believed strength meant enduring people who hurt me without breaking. I was wrong. Sometimes strength is signing the paper. Sometimes it is accepting the open door. And sometimes it is leaving without needing the people who diminished you to finally understand what they lost.